I had thought that raising capital would be easier because I had built up all of these relationships and these contacts that had capital. They were investors. But when the day came that I had a deal, you hear the time all the time, once you have the deal, the money will follow. That's not always the case. I remember, Garrett, it took me 2 months about and $7,000 to renovate that first unit. And it was bad, man. I mean, there were hoarders, mice, roaches, and there was so much nicotine. They had lived there for 5 to 7 years, I think. And I remember there was like a picture or a cross that used to be there, but you could only see the outline and the nicotine was dripping off the wall.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I had to kills it with paint, but yeah, it took me 2 months and $7,000. And then the neighboring unit next to that was a drug dealer, and he actually went to prison. And so we officially had to evict him and we sold his stuff and all that. But I hired someone to go in there. It took him 2 weeks and $7,500. And I thought, you know what, man, I'm done with renovating units and working with nicotine and killing at 2 a.m., 1 a.m. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I had a lot of good learning lessons there.
Wow. That is crazy, man. Um, it takes some bravery to be able to go into that kind of situation. Okay, so you do all that stuff, and then what happens? You're done with the project. You move out of there and keep the fourplex. How do you get bigger than that?
Yeah, so I stayed pretty small. I mean, small today and from my viewpoint now. So I did a duplex, the same strategy. That was an Eloy, actually. So the drive for that one was even longer. Um, and sold the fourplex through a 1031 exchange, bought a retail facility, did a flip. And so
Well, how
that
much
was
did you
about
make on that fourplex?
170 grand,
170,000. And then you rolled that, you 1031 exchange that into
a retail
something else,
facility.
retail
Hmm.
facility. Oh, cool.
Hmm.
So how did you find that? How did you learn about how to do that?
Well, it was really a joint venture
Mhm.
and just an opportunity that came across my desk. And it was a partner that I had met at my first apartment meetup here in the Valley. And he presented me with this offering, and I was just in the midst of selling this fourplex. And I had the choice to buy a 16 unit, which I was debating about buying with some partners, or I could just use this 170K to buy that, or I could raise the capital for the 16 unit and at the same time invest in that retail facility with the 1031. And so I decided to do both. And that's what we did.
But how did you learn about raising capital from going to the house hack side? Were there any products with Michael or anything that helped you along the way?
Yeah. So it was a lot of surrounding myself with people. You guys have a great podcast. And so listening to a lot of podcasts about raising capital and just learning how to do that. And for that first 3 years, I had been doing a ton of networking. And so I had met some people that could put some capital down. I will say this, that it was a lot more challenging than I thought to raise capital, especially as a younger professional. Um, and so that was something that I had to overcome, but we did get that deal done. Thank God.
Why do you think it was so much harder for you and
You
for
know,
many?
mhm. Yeah, I think part of it might be just my age, right? So at that time, I think I was 23 years old. Buying out of state, that property was located in Oklahoma City. And, I had thought that raising capital would be easier because I had built up all of these relationships and these contacts that had capital. They were investors. But when the day came that I had a deal, you hear the time all the time, once you have the deal, the money will follow. That's not always the case, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of these investors, they just didn't, they had just invested in another deal or they were going through a divorce and it just wasn't a good time for them.
Yeah, that's the thing, guys, is investors, even if they go into a deal with you the first time, they may not do the second one because of timing. Maybe that
Hmm.
that whatever that 50,000 or 100,000 was all they had saved up, and that's it. And so having consistent conversations with investors just to kind of see where they're at. We do like surveys. We have a lot of investors just to kind of see where their sentiment is. So you're not counting on them the next time. And then always adding to that list, I think is really important.
Absolutely.
And always building that, because you never know. You can't rely on just a couple people to fund everything for you,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're going after just high net worth investors like that. So
Right.
that's
I was just having a conversation with a newer investor who hasn't done his first apartment deal. And he says, I have two investors lined up. And I told him, man, that is not enough investors. What happens if, they don't want to invest and you have this deal, then you're kind of screwed.
yeah. And I always said, I would never, like, I would be terrified if I went and found a deal, put up earnest money, and I didn't have any of the inroads built with investors ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So we had someone on the podcast, is pretty famous podcaster named Jordan Harbinger, and his quote, he took this from somewhere else, but he said, "Build a well before you're thirsty,"
Mm-hmm.
and that is so true. When it comes down to getting investments, you need to build the well before you're thirsty. Meaning, you need to be pitching deals to people that are fake, that are maybe similar to a deal that you're going to do, and just say, this is the type of stuff we do. You can make a fake deck. Say, hey, it's going to look something like this when we get it. It's not here yet, but this is what we do. Build the relationship with them, get them to trust you, keep them included in the things that you're doing so they understand what's going on. If you're able to build a platform through social media, that's a really easy way to just get random strangers
Mm-hmm.
that are watching and saying, "Oh, that guy knows what he's talking about."
Yeah.
To reach
And
out.
don't quit. And don't quit
Yeah.
because you're going to hit a lot of road bumps. It might take 18 months until you get that first deal, but I'll tell you what, it will be worth it.
So, and is that how long it took you?
No, it took me, I think my first commercial, I was lucky, man, very blessed. I think it took me 3 months to find that first 16 unit apartment.
So it can take 3 months as well. It can take,
Yeah.
but I know people that it took them 3 years to figure it out or more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's that law of the first deal that really makes things, uh, you know, roll downhill once you get into something, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, so when you change markets, so if you're going from you and like certain areas in Phoenix, first of all, do whatever you can to get a deal done. But there's a risk factor when you're jumping around markets, because most markets are block to block, right? So you're essentially going, looking at submarkets, and that's a big part of your success, are the submarkets. So you have to, if you're going to OKC, for example, like you did, you have to learn all that, right, in order to really understand what you're getting into. So
Right. And
that
also partner with someone on the ground that knows those
yes,
submarkets, right?
yep, that's a way to hack that for sure. It's a better way to do it. Cool, man. So you went to buy something in OKC, and that was that. How big was that deal again?
16 units.
16 units. Okay, awesome. So that was kind of like your first bigger ish deal. And then where are you at now?
So today we own, I think 117 units across 3 states, and that's 6 assets.
So 3 states, 6 assets. That is awesome. Uh and how did you continue to build up from that 16 unit? What started to happen for you?
Well, we just talked about the law of the first deal, right?
Mhm.
You get that first deal done, and that is a huge thing to overcome. And also for me, whenever I found, especially starting off, if there's someone that's just starting off and they're younger or inexperienced, it is so valuable to partner with someone else that has a net worth, has the experience, has the investors that can get the deal done. So partnering with others that had that for me was probably one of the most important things. And that's exactly what I did. So I found someone that was really active in New Mexico, and that was a fairly less competitive market, at least compared to DFW or Phoenix, especially 2 years ago. And he had taught me already how to underwrite, actually using the tool we use is a Michael Blanc SDA, which is an amazing tool. And so, yeah, partner with him, and it just went from there.